Hello everybody, how are you doing? Now it is a crazy busy time here in Hong Kong at the moment. The city has pretty much opened up. We have a big music festival taking place this weekend called Clockenflap with lots of bands playing Arctic Monkeys, Phoenix, the Cardigans, even the Wu-Tang Clan and me. So I'm in here choosing records to play for a DJ set taking place this coming Saturday. But I'm not here to talk about that. There's two things I want to talk quickly about. The first one is the fact the SFC have just released its consultation on essentially regulation of virtual asset trading platforms, crypto exchange regulation, and it's not banning crypto like people would think. Actually, all they're really doing is making sure that it's subject to the same regulations in terms of money laundering, making sure you have responsible people involved, making sure consumers don't get ripped off that you would find with any other financial investment platform. So far it's pretty good. It is 300 pages, so I'm not going to talk about it in detail. Instead, I'll provide a link to it in this video, and whether you're watching it on YouTube or indeed on LinkedIn or wherever else, I'll make sure you can see it. What I do want to talk about though is ChatGPT. People have been asking me to give my comments on what I think of it and whether it's the future, whether it's essentially the rise of the robots, and maybe it is. Now to do that, let me go somewhere a bit more tech focused, where I'm surrounded by computers, like where I normally shoot my videos, rather than here in what's supposed to be a living room, but actually, let's be honest, it is some sort of record room. Let me go over there, let's play some music, and let's talk about whether we're all going to be replaced by machines. Now, I said I was going to go somewhere more comfortable, but I've just gone from being surrounded by records to be surrounded by books, computer equipment, audio gear. I don't even know some of the stuff that is that side of the room. It's just out of shot. Pretty sure those are action figures, but let's not go into too much detail on that. Instead, let's talk about ChatGPT, run by OpenAI. Now, if you've never heard of it, and I'd be very surprised if you haven't, I'd wonder why you even clicked on this video. ChatGPT is, as you would expect, a chat platform that allows you to essentially interact with AI and use OpenAI's platform to create things. Now, you'll have used internet chat. These days, you probably use it when you're using a customer service bot, quite frankly. I've had to deal with a lot of those. But you remember the golden days when people were using things like Yahoo Chat and ICQ, and you'd speak to people, and suddenly people were on the other end of the world, and you had conversations with people in other countries, and it was revolutionary. Then it all went a bit seedy, it all went a bit wrong because it started being used for nefarious purposes, left, right, and centre, and essentially closed down. And now, of course, we just use Zoom and Teams and whatever other platform you might be using. Essentially, ChatGPT is you chatting with an AI who will create things for you. Now, previously, if you're using AI to create things, you need to use some sort of dedicated platform. I talked previously about the art generation platforms, and I recommend watching that video because it'll give you some context for this. But now you literally log into ChatGPT, assuming it's available in your country. It isn't in Hong Kong, but we have VPNs to get around, that sort of thing. And you ask it to produce something. Write me an essay on Darwin, for example. Write me a law exam question. Write me an article on X, Y, and Z. And it will create something. And it will create something that actually looks and feels as if it's something that would be publishable, something that's good enough that actually it could be used commercially. And this creates some quite interesting questions. Now, I want to talk about those questions first. What I recommend you do, if you can get access, is go and play with it. Now, you'll be training the AI, so you'll be leading to the downfall of humanity. I'm joking. But I recommend going and have a play with it just to see how it works, because it is quite revolutionary. It's quite incredible how it understands essentially human text very well. You can have a conversation with it, and it will tailor your requirements. What you ask, say what you want, you ask more things about what you want, and eventually you will get something that would be usable. And there's lots of ways this will revolutionize and also perhaps ruin creative industries, law, anything that relies on the processing and use of information, which, let's face it, is pretty much everything that we do these days. Now, ChatGPT, there was a thing recently that they used OpenAI to pass one of the US bar exams, something that would normally take years for someone to do. It did only just scrape through, but still, it scraped through to an event that it was good enough to be a lawyer, which creates a few questions. So first off, I want to talk about, really, are we now worried that AI has reached a phase where it could actually replace human beings, where it could do a human being's job? There's been lots of talk, certainly in the last 10 years, about whether we'd all be replaced by robots. There's a worry that we would. To a certain extent, we have been. And there's two sort of schools of thought on this. One is that yes, it's just a natural progress. It's just like the Industrial Revolution all over again. The other one is like, well, what are all these people going to do? Are we just going to have rich people with their AI and their robots, and have all of the poor living in some sort of seedy underbelly of a city? Is it going to be like Make Room, the book by, I think it was Harry Harrison, which was turned into Soylent Green? Is that the world we're heading to? I'm not going to talk about that. The fact is that AI is here to stay, and it will be influencing what we do. But the impact it could have on the creative industries and on professional industries is quite interesting, because first off, it's quite hard to tell if you get something generated by an AI that it has been generated by an AI unless you read it in detail, unless you focus on it. So at the moment, we're seeing a surprising number, I'm seeing this certainly on my social media feeds, of articles written for clickbait publications that have clearly been written using ChatGPT. They look similar. You can tell that they don't really give you any concrete analysis of anything. There's no real features. It's literally regurgitating some sort of press release it's read somewhere, throwing a bit of comments in it may have found on the internet, and Blair. Read about the new Marvel movie. It's this. You've just wasted 5 minutes of your life reading something written by an AI. The thing is, though, you can see how this will just advance as time goes on. It will become more believable. Essentially, the AI will adapt and evolve, and things will become easier harder to tell apart from something that's been written by a real human being. And of course, then the temptation is there for real human beings just to use the AI to write things. So you may find, rather than having, and this has been something we've talked about before on this channel, we might find that AI are writing newspapers, because it doesn't really matter, does it, whether it's interesting to read. You're just trying to find the facts. That's not true, by the way, and apologies to any journalist friends who may be offended by that. But even for law, if you're asking for legal advice, well, why do you essentially need to go to a lawyer when you could ask ChatGPT just to give you advice on whether your claim's going to succeed or fail, whether you should be drafting a new contract, or ask it, why can't you? I mean, you can, to draft the contract for you, give you the first draft of a precedent contract, rather than using a human being, a professional support lawyer who would find precedents for you to do X, Y, and Z and work like that. And this is where it starts to get a bit scary. You can see human beings being replaced. Why use trainee lawyers who often get used to do pretty mundane, pretty boring stuff? I spent nearly a year of my training contract just in a room writing page numbers on pieces of paper, which I can tell you didn't really help my career in any way. And if anything, I got worse at counting. But you can see how those people will be replaced, and you'll end up in a position where people use AI more and more. And yes, we'll have jobs where people are essentially training and working with AI, but you won't necessarily be in a position where everyone can find something to replace them. Going back to my point about jobs. So that's one issue. Now, that may happen. My issue really, though, is that someone, I think it was a journalist in I think it might have been The Guardian, but don't quote me on that, described ChatGPT as mansplaining as a service. Now, I hate the phrase mansplaining because I think it's a bit unfocused, a bit sexist, but it's giving a very general, very undetailed, very unnuanced view of something based on limited expertise that it's just kind of developed over time. And if anything, that's what AI will do. It will always try and find what are the most common responses to a question, what is the most likely outcome to something, what are the most, if they're looking at an article on, and I mentioned Darwin earlier, on Darwinism, what are the most leading texts on Darwinism it has access to and it can reach, and it will just make a sort of hodgepodge of those and spit it out to you, and then you get something that's quite banal and not necessarily very innovative. So you end up with a very innovative solution that's stifling innovation. And I see this being a massive problem. I see this being an issue in the creative industries, but I also see it being a problem in things like in accounting, which I know is maybe not creative interesting, but I've seen my share of creative accounting here in Hong Kong. But things like law, things like writing, if people start getting their AI using ChatGPT to write, I can't be bothered with these chapters of the books, I'll just get an AI to write them. Where do we end up there? We've also got an issue, and I've been chatting to people who work in some of the universities, that they worry that students, particularly when something's not exam based, where they're not, when you're doing coursework, which always seemed like an easier thing when I was a student, even though actually it's often harder because you've got to spend a lot more time on it. But rather than getting someone to write your essays, and I used to have to do 2 essays every week when I was at university, rather than staying up all night sitting in the library listening to the sort of the dustbin van roll in the early hours of the morning, why not just get an AI to write it in a few minutes, and then boom, just tinker it a bit and give it into a tutor? And academics are worried about this. On the other side of the field, you've got the fact that some academics thinking, well, this makes learning a lot easier. Rather than having to spend all of this time pouring through books, doing things, you can do the grunt, boring work using ChatGPT, using an AI, and then you can usually do the innovative stuff yourself. You can think as a human rather than having to memorize and learn all these pointless facts and think, well, how does this? Don't need to worry about what this means. I just need to worry how to interpret it, and it's fascinating. I find it absolutely fascinating. Now, the problem is with all AI is that if you become completely reliant on it, I think you do lose a bit of your humanity. You do stifle what you've been trying to do in the first place, of create something that is ingenious or unique or something that's fantastic. And I also worry about, and this is something that I've talked about again before, if you rely on AI too much to make decisions, you suddenly become in a position where you're being governed by the computer. You end up in a position where you're allowing computers to make decisions. And I can see, and you all get frustrated. Think how frustrated you get when you're dealing with some sort of customer services bot. You go up to a supervisor who's clearly then also using some sort of online tool, and there's no human decisions being made. Now, this is something that various jurisdictions have essentially legislated against. You can't have a decision made without a human being involved in the chain. But if the human just goes, well, I'm just going to use the AI and go from that, where do we land? So we'll see. We're in an early stage. I feel this is a revolution akin to the rise of the machines and the awakening of Skynet, but hopefully without everyone being blown up by nuclear bombs and Arnold Schwarzenegger coming to save the day or kill you, depending which film in the franchise you happen to be watching. But we will see. I'm interested in what your views are. I think for law, it's actually a great thing in terms of a research tool, because it takes a lot of the boring, tedious stuff out of research. But at the same time, I have to admit, some of the stuff that I hated doing at law school, spending hours in the library pouring through books, which people don't really do anymore. We've got some great online tools for lawyers, but it did shape my awareness as a lawyer and probably shaped how I think about things. It made me appreciate perhaps some of the effort that had to go in producing something that was relevant. And if you lose that, well, maybe we all become sort of a very fast, too fast society that don't really think about things, or don't take time to stop, smell the roses, think about their surroundings, or consider really, really the impact that what we do, what we write, what we produce and how we work, what it's having. We just think, well, we'll just get this done as quickly as possible, automate everything, and if the outcome's not so great, well, as long as it'll do, it'll do. And that is a bad situation to be in. So we'll see. Very, very interested in your thoughts. I'm now going to go away and get ready to DJ at a music festival. So if you're in Hong Kong, come and see me. Crimes Against Pop on Saturday at 2 p.m. So I'm on pretty early. So you need to get there relatively early. But hey, stay for the rest of the day because it'll be brilliant and I'll be around. And you can talk to me about records and not about law, which I'll probably be just as enthusiastic about. But that's it for the moment. Hope you're doing well. If you've got any questions, get an AI to write them and send them to me. And I will probably see you very, very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.